Today we will discuss the housing policy framework. Under this policy framework, we will discuss first the major components of a typical housing policy based on the Indian housing policies done so far, and then we will take a case of a state level housing policy to understand in details about the various components and its strategy. So, basically we have several policies framed so far in India. The first policy came in 1994 as National Housing Policy. The second policy, which is named as National Housing and Habitat Policy, it came in 1998. Then National Urban Housing and Habitat Policy 2007, and State Model Affordable Housing Policy 2015, and then National Urban Rental Housing Policy 2016. Now, all these policy documents have different dimensions and different components which is addressed. But for a policy, a typical policy document, what are the different dimensions, different components, we should see that. The first important component of a housing policy is the land, because without land no housing, no houses can be constructed. So, how in a city or in an urban area land can be supplied, what are the means to create more amount of land, and also the tenure can be ensured for the poor people. That is the first thing, first strategy to be taken in a housing policy. Then legal and regulatory frame. To supply more number of housing in a urban area, a specific set of legal and regulatory reforms need to be done. That is also included in housing policy. Third is the finance or the availability of the fund, may be private, may be government, may be joint venture. So, the policy definitely should give a direction of the availability of the fund. Then how the participation of other partners like private partners, NGOs will be there, that is also a question housing policy should answer. Second is that how a whole housing development, housing delivery will be operated and will be institutionalized through a government and private mechanism or a combination of that. And also some demand side strategy or enabling strategy which makes people or the end users or beneficiary more enabled to take the advantage of the market, to take the advantage of the housing policy. So, basically the point number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all these dimensions are basically improves the supply of the housing, and that is why these are called basically the supply side intervention, and also basically supply side improves the delivery, and also we have demand side intervention, which basically which basically enables people to enhance their capacity to buy a house from the market. So, these two elements are covered in a typical housing policy. Now, we will see and also the technology interface, how the technology can help the housing delivery in a more faster and more quicker and in a cost effective way. That is also part of supply side intervention. Then let us see the under the land supply and tenure, what are the basic requirement to be intimated. First is the whether the land management or the provision is covered by the urban local bodies, master plan or the district plan. That means overall planning framework, whether the land as a subject is covered or not. Second is whether at the urban local body level, whether the land banking, pooling and sharing, this kind of strategies is incorporated or not, or what are the prevailing strategy proposed or indicated to gather to generate more amount of land. Then repeal or the withdrawal of the Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act. We have discussed in details about the Land Ceiling Act, therefore, we are not going into further details, but this act basically restricts the large amount of land in a single ownership. So, repealing this this act will enable the various landowners and private developer to gather to assemble large amount of land, so that more amount of housing can be generated. Then the tenure, whether the tenure is a rental or leasehold and the tenure is owned as a freehold. So, what kind of tenure is expected and what kind of tenure of the land is basically proposed or indicated, that is a very important part of a housing policy. Then the financial part. So, whether the finance will come from the central government or state government, there could be a shelter fund where the some amount of premium amount can be taken from the private developer as well as government developer for developing the housing, and that fund can be leveraged for the development of the economically weaker section or the lower income group housing. There could be sources of funding backed by the mortgage finance or secondary mortgage market or debt market. This market can also create a substantial amount of funding for the housing projects. Then the various housing finance institution, microfinance institution, cooperative housing society and other public and private housing societies, they can also mobilize and arrange the housing finance. Apart from that, mobilizing domestic savings, insurance and pension funds, investment of the private profits, that also sometimes add a very important source of the housing finance. So, what are the provisions in all this category or the options in the housing policy? What are the major thrust area? What is the priority in the housing finance options? That question need to be answered in a typical housing policy framework. Let us now discuss about the institutional framework, how a housing policy works under any institution of the government and private body. So, at the central level there is a central level monitoring committee at the apex level, at the ministry level, at the central government level. After the central level monitor committee, that is a state nodal agency. Sometimes the state nodal agency is the urban development department, sometimes it is the housing board. So, every state government has to finalize that who is the state nodal agency. Apart from the central and state nodal agency, there could be a special purpose vehicles at state level. The state government or central government, they can create a separate organization just for this purpose to deliver different or various kinds of different housing projects. And also nodal agency at the urban local body level, municipal level or the development societies level or neighborhood group level. Also the urban local bodies development authority and the local level, there could be agencies who will look after the development of the housing projects, including the private development. So, this is the institutional framework under which the whole housing delivery will be operated. Then let us see how the legal and regulatory framework will help us in creating more number of housing and deliver more number of housing. First of this is single window clearing system. We know that the governance structure is sometimes hampers the speedy delivery or the speedy sanction of the project. So, single window clearance system is one of the means which helps developers to get the early clearance, early sanction to deliver more housing project. Online approval system or e-governance also can help in quickly delivery or quickly sanctioning of the housing project. Then streamlining of the planning and development norms. Right now the planning and development norms is institutionalized by urban local bodies, development authorities, pollution control board, several institution. So, if this can be streamlined through a specific and a converged framework and through the single window clearance system, that will be very nice. And what is the policy perspective on that, that need to be discussed. Then perspective plans for housing. Each city, we discussed last day that each city after the development plan has to make a housing strategy for the whole city or the whole sub region. So, that perspective plan will show the city that next 10 years, 20 years how the housing can be developed. Stamp duty and property tax reforms is very important under the legal and regulatory reform. Under this the variable property tax, variable stamp duty based on the economic group is suggested for by the various policy documents. Then computerized land revenue system, the land revenue collection, land revenue map preparation, its maintenance is a very huge task and done by the state government and the state land revenue department. This can be computerized, it can be addressed by improved technology, so that it can be used as a readily available reference for the land availability and the housing conversions. And also then income eligibility certification, this is very important because for the subsidy based housing and the cross subsidy based housing, this income eligibility is one of the benchmark by which government determines that which group is to be given the housing projects. So, these are the legal regulatory reform. Time to time government central and state government, they revise this income eligibility as per the market value. Then the partnership. So, how a government as a apex organization incentivize the private partner by giving tax and stamp duty, additional FAR, TDR rights, and also exemption from the land use conversion charges, building plan approval fees, and line infrastructure charges and external development charges. These are the tools with the development authority or the municipality or the government, which can be extended to the private developer to incentivize development of the housing for the poor people in a bigger land. And also the incentives can be given for the beneficiary. Then property right or the land tenure can be given to slum dwellers through the partnership. Flexible internal rest also can create a incentive for the private partner. Government sometimes can tell that, okay, if you come up and if you develop housing projects, we will provide the interest or the interest subsidy. Then technology is the very important interface in creating large amount of housing in a given time. So, there can be various approach. Number one, there can be encouragement to the vernacular styles of architecture, vernacular styles of construction of housing, and where the focus will be low cost and mass housing technologies, prefab and green technologies. I talked about last day about the technology submission, and technology submission aims to have the prefab and green technology for all housing projects across the country. Then software support can help us in streamlining the process of the housing design, planning, and the transfer, sanctioning process, everything. Then also disaster resistant technologies. Most of the time we talk about the housing based on the family requirements, but apart from the family requirement, there are the requirement of the transit houses for the disaster resistance area as a transit housing, and also the permanent dwellings which are basically strong enough to withstand the disaster and the various types of natural disaster. So, these are the technology interface or the more amount of research is required in the technology interface and technology requirement, so that we can deliver more number of housing in a given period of time, short period of time. Now, so this is overall the dimensions of a typical housing project, and based on this dimension a housing policy should take various levels of strategy. Sometimes it can take the supply side intervention, it can take the demand side intervention. There could be interventions in various aspects like livelihood and other aspect, operational aspect. So, now we will see a case study of a state housing policy. We have discussed so far the national housing policy and their dimensions. Now, let us see an example of a state housing policy to discuss the details of the dimension of the housing policy. For this, we have taken the housing for all in urban areas, the policy for housing for all in urban areas, government of Odisha 2015. So, under this policy, their vision is this. Just have a quick reading. So, please observe that the focus is on urban areas, then focus is on affordability limits, and also focus is on a system and consistency over a period of time. These are the very important part of a vision of the housing policy. Let us see the mission statement. So, you can see that the mission statement incorporates the strategy as a keyword, and also steady supply of affordable housing stock, and also the time frame of 7 years. Then you can see the to address the housing deficit. So, mission statement basically complements the vision in terms of the action or the specific strategy at the ground level. Now, we will see after the vision and mission statement that what are the strategies under this policy, housing for all policy in government of Odisha they have taken. So, they have taken strategies in supply side, demand side, livelihood and operational. So, let us see what are the supply side strategy. The first strategy is the mandatory provision of economically weaker section housing in any housing project in the urban areas. Second is the creating a favorable environment where the private partner and the other partner like NGOs, they also can operate and develop housing with minimal disturbances, minimal problems in a favorable environment. The government will frame a policy for public private partnership so that more number of private partners can participate in the housing development and delivery. Government will also determine principles of land allocation, its distribution and its effective use for the housing and its infrastructure development. All this will integrate the slum people, and so government will prepare a separate policy framework for the slum improvement and slum upgradation. So, all these are basically supply side intervention which will ensure the speedier housing supply for the all category of the housing, giving a emphasis or focus for the economically weaker section. The second is the demand side. We discussed that there are supply side and demand side intervention in terms of housing delivery. So, there are basically, it is proposed that in all urban areas there will be a affordable housing facilitation center. The center will enable the common people, the general people, make them aware about the schemes and procedures and make them enhance their capacity to to access the institutional or the housing finance, so that they can buy the housing from the market. So, this AHFC is a very important intervention in this housing policy. Second is the ensuring a transparent process in the transaction of the housing, starting from the booking to the registration, so that a common person can book a house and after that during the construction and during the registration there is a transparent process ensured. That is a very important part at the demand side intervention. At the service level also, apart from the housing as a product, as a process, they have also earmarked several strategy at the service level. For example, responsibility framework. The government will create a responsibility framework at every level, starting from the government level, district level, local level, and also including a project development agency. Every government, every level, there will be project development agency whose work will be to ensure the effective execution of the project. Each and every housing society has to register themselves for the housing, and it is mandatory by policy. So, enabling legal and regulatory mechanism will be framed following this policy, so that every housing society registers and government has a clear cut as a transparent record of the housing society, so that this record can be utilized for the future policy and future strategies. They will enhance the capacity of the local people, capacity of the common people, so that they can access the housing finance and they can access they can be involved in the housing delivery process. CIDF, the CDP Infrastructure Development Fund, this is a kind of a development fund will be created out of the various fund or the finance or the fees received from various developer, and this fund will be utilized for development of the economically weaker section housing or lower income group section housing or its infrastructure. There are strategy for livelihood. I told you in the beginning that housing is not a house or a structure, it has specific linkage with the livelihood, it has specific linkage with the overall infrastructure development, etc. Therefore, in this particular policy they have taken very important linkage or very important interaction or very important strategy to link the livelihood with the housing. First is this: ensure no disruption. Whatever policy or whatever development project is done at the project level or the slum level, there will be effort so that no disruption of the existing livelihood level of the slum population, economically weaker section housing, LIG housing is there. That has to be ensured by the local level agency, local or the state level agency. The public transportation linkage in the urban areas will be planned in such a way so that the people will be able to avail the public transportation with ease of comfort, with minimizing the travel time and ensuring more effective living quality in their house, so that the housing location, the land use housing, residential land use and the transportation linkage are integrated in such a manner so that people can go their livelihood place, the job location within a very quicker time, and that integration in the overall transportation planning is envisaged in the overall housing policy also. This is very, very important for a housing policy. Probably we have not seen this kind of very innovative and logical intervention, planning intervention in any housing policy. The second part is the mixed land use zones. The mixed land use zones ensure the smaller trips between the house and the work situation, house and job situation, and these will ensure the localized trips and the more intense development of the nodes, more intense development of the junctions and more compact development around the junctions, and ensuring the quicker accessibility from the house to job location and job location to house or vice versa. So, that is very important part. They propose as of now 5% of the area as a mixed land use zone, where the commercial and other institutional use can be mixed with the residential zones. Vendors market in the important locations to ease the population's their life, so that people can come from the residential location to the vendors market or the convenience market to have their daily needs, to get their daily needs. In the maintenance project, we have seen that the public housing projects those lacks actually basically maintenance and operation issues. So, the thought was given that whether the residents could be involved in the overall maintenance of the whole site or whole community. That is a very important part. And convergence of all other livelihood programs under the Government of India and Government of Odisha, which will be linked with the housing project, so that there is a convergence and there is no divergence in kind of a difference of the strategy framework, and all the fruits of the other livelihood programs can actually complement the housing delivery and housing development in an integrated manner. So, they suggested few models. One is mandatory provisions of EWS housing, I told before also. Incentive based model for EWS and LIG housing, and under this model, if any developer makes a EWS and LIG housing, the incentive in terms of FAR, in terms of various kinds of incentive, fees exemption will be given. Then development of affordable housing project with the private partnership. In situ slum rehabilitation, there will be attempt to rehabilitate the slum in situ rather than RR, and in exceptional cases there will be resettlement and rehabilitation also. The slum population could be rehabilitated in a separate site from the original site, but if it is required absolutely in some cases, other than the effort will be there for the in situ slum rehabilitation. Another very important part is the beneficiary led construction, whether the people in the slum area, people in that particular project can be involved in the construction of the housing project. Though this is nothing new, the self-help approach was practiced long back also, but it has been included in this housing policy as well. So based on this models, also the rental housing is included as a separate model under the suggested model. So government of Odisha is trying their level best through this model and through this the strategies we discussed so far to enable a market, to create a enabled market, to create more number of housing for the poor. So what are the uniqueness of this housing policy, affordable housing policy? So mandatory provision for all project, mandatory provision of the EWS housing and LIG housing is a very innovative idea, and what I say is a desperate intervention by the government for the housing policy. If any developer does not pay, does not make the provision for the EWS housing mandatorily, then they have to create a shelter fund, they have to deposit some amount of fund to the government in place of non-development of the EWS housing. That fund will be utilized for future development of the EWS and LIG housing. That is very important innovative idea which was indicated in this housing policy. Then compensatory FAR for any project, the private developer can be given compensatory FAR if they build more number of EWS and LIG housing, they can be given additional FAR as a compensation, so that they can develop the project in a viable basis. Mixed use development, already I told, because mixed use development has lot of advantage if it is used up to a certain level. So that is given very thrust or focus in this overall policy. And also project development agency is supposed to take care of the projects at the ground level. It is to be created at the local and the state level organization. So today we have discussed the housing policy framework at the central level, government level. We discussed the dimensions of the land, dimensions of the finance, dimensions of the institutional framework, legal framework, and the partnership, and based on that dimensions or the components we discussed a case of the state level housing policy. We have discussed the Odisha housing policy today. Under the Odisha housing policy we have seen these are the uniqueness. They have adopted several models and several strategy in the supply side intervention and the demand side interventions. So with this we conclude this lecture today, and next day we will discuss about the legal framework of the housing, how a legal framework at the central level, state level and the local level can compensate or complement the housing policy for the poor. Thank you.